again, you said political balance. If you think about it, the Green Party are in power in Scotland. They have one MP in this place. I'm sure we don't see them as much as the 35 appearances Nigel Farage has done. Tice comes on a lot. Do you know what I mean? It feels like they're called Reform now, aren't they? That they're quite a regular fixture. Whereas parties they've never had anyone actually elected to Parliament. Do you know what I mean? It feels they have a lot of airtime from you guys.
Delivery of news, like the delivery of Impartiality. There is a code of conduct which applies to all non-executive directors of on the board.
Forgive me, but is that his role?
What is wrong?
To go down there and talk to them about delivering? Is that what he's on the board for?
Managed to fulfil
people
the
watching
requirements
do
that
notice
they have.
Malanie Phillips the other week, she's been on 28 times, Piers Morgan, people like that, 23 times. I mean, I know you want shock jock people for a bit of value who say something controversial, but still you do have in your charter educate, inform, entertain, all that stuff. And yes. To be so I think that would be worth taking away and looking at. I mean, look, one barometer people have of impartiality is the panels that you see on Question Time. And for the last full year that figures are available, apparently there were 28 panellists from non-dom or foreign-owned overseas billionaire sort of media outlets. 28 of those, and only 6 from centrist or centre-left. And I'm counting from Private Eye to the Daily Mirror, Novara and Vice Media. Doesn't that look massively unbalanced? Anyway.
I'm sorry to say I'm totally unaware of that data and where it's come from. All I know is that, so I'd be very interested to see it, but all I know is that the Question Time team, which is incredibly expert in this, spends a lot of time spinning a lot of plates in the air, trying to make sure that its panels are gender representative, are ethnically diverse, are geographically disparate, are socioeconomically representative, are politically representative of all of the different political parties and in the country, plus all kinds of other factors that weigh into their decision about who's on the panels, quite apart from whether or not the people concerned are actually good at being on panels or not. And so all of those factors are taken into account on a weekly basis, and over time, the Question Time team aspires to get a genuinely representative range of people with all sorts of different views on their panels. So I'm not aware of that piece of analysis. I'm very, very happy to have a look at it and see whether there's any inherent bias in what they're doing. But all I can say is they struggle incredibly hard. They have some advice from my chief advisor of politics about this. They struggle incredibly hard to make sure that panel is.
They also look at the long-term data. Yeah. So it's worth us just looking at the data and just making sure, in terms of in the round, because that's 34 people out of a lot. So we need to have a look at it in the round. No, I don't want to dismiss the data. I'm just saying there is, to David's point, if you talk to the Question Time, and I have, others have, we've been down there talking, many of you have had the pleasure, is they work extremely hard on a data-based approach. So we should look at that. I'm more than happy to look at it.
More figures from that same year, 22-23. 6 trade unionists. So these are people who represent millions and millions of working people. But 13 business people, the man from Sainsbury's, the man from Iceland, you see them pop up every week. 6 trade unionists only. It doesn't look right. And again, you said political balance. If you think about it, the Green Party are in power in Scotland. They have one MP in this place. I'm sure we don't see them as much as the 35 appearances Nigel Farage has done. Tice comes on a lot. Do you know what I mean? It feels like they're called Reform now, aren't they? That they're quite a regular fixture. Whereas parties they've never had anyone actually elected to Parliament. Do you know what I mean? It feels they have a lot of airtime from you guys.
Well, you're talking about the numbers of appearances by Nigel Farage over a very, very long period of time. If you totalled up all of the Green Party appearances over that same period of time, I'm sure it would come to a significant number as well. So I think you have to be really careful about comparing apples with apples and pears with pears here, making sure that you've got the right sorts of comparisons. But I mean, I'm very happy to take the figures away and take them to Question Time and ask them whether they think they've managed to fulfil the requirements that they have.
Do notice Malanie Phillips the other week, she's been on 28 times, Piers Morgan, people like that, 23 times. I mean, I know you want shock jock people for a bit of value who say something controversial, but still, you do have in your charter educate, inform, entertain, all that stuff. And to be, so I think that would be worth taking away and looking at.
Well, certainly, if you've got data which I haven't seen or which the Question Time
yes.
team haven't seen, we'll certainly be happy to take it to the Question Time team and ask them to talk about, and if necessary, even drop you a line and explain what where they're coming from.
Right. Okay. I mean, the other case that popped up this week. I mean, if you think about, they're now called Reform UK, but in their previous incarnation as UKIP. David Cameron called UKIP a bunch of far-right, a bunch of fruitcakes, loons and closet racists. They're now called Reform UK. Their one MP was not elected but lost the Conservative whip for Islamophobic conspiracy outbursts that he did and wouldn't apologise. This week you've had to apologise for calling them far-right. I just wondered how much pressure you were under and from who, because it's not by Ofcom. So, yeah.
Yeah,
a lot of people would say, if you know, some of their candidates.
I don't think far right's the right label. Full stop. And that's our judgment editorially. Yeah, we may have different views on it, but I don't think it's the right label. In terms of pressure, we did have a few complaints, but we reflect on it ourselves. I mean, these are editorial judgments. My personal view is you've got to be a bit careful with far left, far right, with parties that carry quite a lot of support. And
where would you place them on the spectrum? I mean, some of the statements from some of their candidates are quite alarming. Yeah. The Guardian said they're a haven for conspiracy theorists, extremists. They're a social democrat party in all but name. They're against international law.
I understand, but with respect, if we judged our labels by individual quotes from members, I think that would be an interesting strategy in itself. I think they're clearly right. A party on the right of politics. I just think if you get into far left or far right descriptors and will behave fairly on this, you end up in the wrong territory.
From them, they complained a lot and then you backed down, this grovelling apology.
We got complaints, but if you think we just, respond under pressure on that, that's not how we work. We consider.
It looks like it.
Well, it may, but I'm just telling you how it works. It absolutely, and I understand the concern, and these are judgments. But my view is we made the right call in terms of saying that is not the right label.
I mean, I know in 2021, James Wilde MP said there were not enough Union Jacks in your annual review.
I remember it's one of my only social media hits, where it was largely a positive experience for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
In a 268-page annual report, he didn't like the lack of union. So I'm glad you haven't backed down in some respects, but I think you could be a bit.
Sorry, I'm lost on the comment. I just want to understand it so I can respond.
Okay, so I don't know who's pressuring you. It just seems a bit odd that you're backing down. With respect. I am pressured from, and I love this job, but the pressure is ferocious from every side. If we responded to every, we're getting. This is a more polarised time. I talked about this. Everyone wants to ascribe intent. There are people who think we've got an agenda to the right, an agenda to the left. We're woke warriors on one side. We're small c conservatives on the other. I can tell you that if you go and meet the editors of programmes like this Question Time, I'm fiercely proud of them because what they're trying to do is calmly get this right. This is not for an agenda. Send you those figures because
they're very helpful. So we should have those figures, and they're useful for the Question Time team. They'll take them in the right spirit. But I'm just saying we're trying to make judgment that apply this fairly across the board. And by the way, I've had incoming on every side on Question Time.
Or Laura Koonsberg or any of those programmes, they have your 3 talking heads and you've got 2 leavers and a journalist or something. It's quite, people do notice this. But okay, I'll send you some hard facts on this because it looks like you're being lent on. The whole point of the midterm review.
I just want to be really clear, we're not being lent on.
Okay, I'm saying how it's
that's where I'm. But I'm telling you as Director General that we're not being lent on in that way. We are open-minded to complaint. When complaints come in, reflect them and go, are we in the right place? Having smart people to do that. And as you know, we've split David's, job job focuses very much on pre-broadcast, and we've got Peter Johnson, we might come to that in terms of the complaint system. It's very strong, they're very wise people, and they're thinking through these issues. They are, we do not make decisions based on strength of people leaning on us. We're an fiercely independent, without fear or favour broadcaster. That's what we stand for. And anyone who says different is factually incorrect. Now, that's not to say we're not immune from when people have views or comment, you reflect on it. It's not being weak to think through something if someone raises an issue. It's just sensible.
Have you got any comment on these stories that after forcing out people from the news channel and splitting, you're going to reverse everything you did? The merger, a lot of people lost their jobs over it, and now you're going to do an about turn and do separate channels for world and domestic again. It's been in the Telegraph. Is there any truth in that?
No, we always said that we would balance the different streams and ops, and we continually make changes, but the overall move to one news channel, and there are, to the earlier question, there are risks with that when you've got a big domestic story. But the other thing is, remember, we may well touch on funding. We have had our budget cut by 30% in 10 years to 2020, and we've had to cope with it. So you can't do everything. So I care about these things, but we had to make some changes. And we're not rowing back, but we'll make adjustments editorially as we go.
And last one from me, the Gary Lineker review, or whatever it was, the John Hardy review.
John Hardy review,
about
yeah.
the social media output.
There was only one person writing that review, to be clear. Yeah.
Not the midterm review.
I know there's been speculation on that, but yeah.
Not the midterm review, but that specific one in that case.
Yeah, the social media review by John Hardy is what we're referring to.
What's changed practically?
I think we're doing well. I know everyone have their view on what about that tweet or what. I honestly think we're doing very well based on what I see around the world. 20,000 people, yes, we have issues to deal with. And by the way, I did say to the committee, when you asked me, would I continue to have issues in social media, I said, absolutely. You've got 20,000 people with different accounts and this, that and the other. You're gonna have some exceptions and things going on. But when I look monthly at our reports on thousands of journalists, how they're behaving, and also across the BBC, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Are you confident it can withstand a general election? Someone won't be tempted to
I think it can. But do I think I'm going to be picking up the paper and not reading about anything in the next year? Only in my dreams. I think this is an area where you're constantly going to have to manage it. And you've got freelance community, you've got others. I think where I feel very strongly is, and remember, the guidelines are tight for news, journalist, factual programming. And I have to say, they are doing an outstanding job, and I thank all of them. Local journalists, and they've been through a lot in terms of all the things going on. I think they behave brilliantly. I think it's working very well.
Thanks, Rupert. Alex?
Just a quick follow-up from the middle of Rupert's pack of questions. If you describe the Conservative Party as a centre-right party, the Labour Party as a centre-left party, how would you describe Reform and the Workers' Party, who both have a Member of Parliament?
I just stay on the right and the left of politics. That's all I need to go to.
Hi.
Thank you. Just to follow up on some of your answers, you said we're doing well several times in answer to some of the questions. Is there anything you'd like to tell us about that's not going well?
Oh, how long have you got?
Well,
we've
to be scrutinised.
No, absolutely. We've got loads of work to do. I think, if you look at the midterm review, it says, we're still doing, we still get to 94% of people a month. That's very good. But actually, if you look at, in a hyper-competitive market, there are certain sections of society that get less value from the BBC. So we need to work harder on that, in direct answer to your question. We could talk about across the UK, where I feel that in some parts of the UK, we're not delivering as much value as we could to people because we could be doing more work locally and producing more, and we're in the midst of that, so we can improve there. I think we now and again make journalistic mistakes. They're low in number, but you just got to constantly learn, like the ones we've been talking about earlier. So of course we can improve there, and so I think there's plenty to do. And I think also institutions have to be properly questioning of themselves in terms of groupthink. That's one of the reasons I like pushing, major areas of news outside London. You can, for the first time, you can become a network news editor without coming to London. That's major. And it's subtle, this. It shapes the output. You think differently. If you look at the quality of breakfast, for instance, television, it's just got a slightly different flavour coming from Salford. I think these things we can keep improving. We can get our batting averages up in terms of, our return on our commissions, and our return investment has to be outstanding versus the Netflix and the Primes, because they've got much bigger pockets. So, our commissioning teams are the best in the world in terms of return on investment, but they can do better. We can grow our commercial arm. Yeah, we can talk about that. So the list is long. I remain healthily dissatisfied in that regard.
I think somebody else might be asking questions about the growth of the commercial arm. But since the mid-term review, what have you done to strengthen your complaints procedures?
Well, as you know, the mid-term review made a number of recommendations in relation to the complaints process. One of which was to change our agreement so that the board is very specifically responsible, not just for creating the framework within which we handle complaints, but also responsible for the process of handling them on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. The mid-term review also made some other recommendations in relation to governance. One of them, the Director General has already referred to, which was splitting up my role so that there is now a Director of Complaints and Reviews who's responsible for all of the post-broadcast issues that arise from programmes, and I'm responsible for things that happen before broadcast and for the advice and that goes into programmes before that from an editorial policy direction. I have other responsibilities too. They also recommended that there was greater oversight by the committee of the board, which is called the Editorial Guidelines and Standards Committee of the board, of the complaints process, and that the independent members of that board have a greater role in overseeing the complaints process and being responsible for it. They've made a number of recommendations in relation to Ofcom. One was that they should review all of the ECU upheld findings and make sure that they were satisfied. That was as far as was needed. They've changed the basis on which written online material is complained about at the third stage. So there is a process at the moment which is rather peculiar, which involves Ofcom giving an opinion of any written online material that's appealed to it in relation to the BBC's editorial guidelines. In future, they will deal with those in exactly the same way as they deal with video and audio material. So that will strengthen the process in dealing with written complaints about written online material. They've also made a number of recommendations about how we increase, and this is both for the BBC and for Ofcom, how we increase awareness of the BBC First system and the knowledge that complainants have of their ability to appeal to different stages of that complaints process. I mean, I suspect we're probably the only corporation in the land that actually has a video which explains to people how they can complain to us, which the midterm review liked. But they want us to go beyond that in telling people how they can complain. So we'll do some more work on publicising our process and making sure that people understand that. And they also wanted us to improve some aspects of the way in which we respond to complaints and be a little bit less defensive about some of our responses at what's called Stage 1B. So there were a whole range of things, all of which we're doing, some of which actually we've already done and put into practice during the course of the discussions with the DCMS about the midterm review.
So as MPs, I think we've all got a lot of experience of dealing with big corporations' complaint procedures, so you're not the only one, I can assure you. You don't have a look at PALs in NHS. I mean, that's all well and good about procedure. Are we assessing the actual people who are complaining and what their experience is and how they feel about that process?
Well, what's happened is that as part of Ofcom's review of the BBC's complaints process, which happened a little while ago, they did something called a mystery shopping exercise, and which basically involves them making complaints through the process.
Did you make a programme about it?
And seeing how they're done. We didn't make a programme about that, no. But they did that, and they came up with some findings, actually some of which have now been reflected in the recommendations of the midterm review. And we know that they're going to do another one of those, and they basically go through the whole process a large number of times, just seeing how well we deal with the complaints that come in that they give to us, as opposed to members of the audience. So there is a way of testing the process in a sensible way that gives us good feedback and helps us to improve our system, and that's what Ofcom's interested in, obviously, as our regulator.
And I heard the exchange earlier on with my colleague Julie Elliott about the coverage of Gaza. But how many complaints have you had in relation to the coverage?
As of this morning, we had just under 4,000 people complaining that our system was that our complaints process or our output rather, our coverage, was biased against Israel, and over 4,000 that it was biased in favour, about 4,200. So those were the complaints as of this morning, roughly those numbers. So they're actually pretty similar, which I think reflects the division of opinion in the country as a whole on that issue.
Okay, and can I just move just to ask you? You published a new...
So I'll just say those are rolling totals from October the 7th onwards.
I would also say that we judge. I think it's a fair pushback when people say, and I think this is important in terms of pressure, is that just number of complaints is, I mean, there's different sizes of communities, different views, all those things. So it's not that the BBC is sitting there going, oh, look, we've got the same number of complaints, therefore we're in the right place. I think, we have to listen, and to the earlier comments, to some things we reflect on and go, okay, we could have done better there on every side of this very difficult situation and traumatic situation. So the complaints are useful context. I don't think they're any more than that.
Yes, but I mean, if we take the broad figures just relating to Gaza, then, but if there are specific items that generate a great deal of concern, they may highlight that something other than just a sort of balance of numbers. For instance, the coverage of the court proceedings in South Africa, may have generated a great deal of criticism on one side. Yeah.
Exactly right.
So in a situation like that, where we get specifically large numbers of complaints about a specific issue, obviously we will look at that very carefully, and usually those will get to our Executive Complaints Unit, and they will make a ruling about whether or not what we did was fair as well.
Can I just ask you quickly about whistleblowing? And you've published new procedures there. I mean, are people coming forward? Are they using that system? How would you assess the success or whether it's working or not?
Lee, do you want to give that?
Yeah, no, thank you. So yes, we have a very clear whistleblowing policy that we've had in place for a number of years, and we've actually just refreshed it to also extend what it covers, including editorial serious malpractice as well. We think that's really important. So that was part of the feedback that we've had. It is well publicised within the BBC, but also externally. So you could Google BBC's whistleblowing policy and find out exactly what it is and how to access it. It obviously operates within a whistleblowing framework. We continue to also provide training to our teams and to our leaders to help ensure people know how to access the whistleblowing, and that it is clearly a confidential environment and a way to raise a complaint. You can raise it internally inside the BBC, but you can also use entirely independent third parties to raise a whistleblowing complaint as well, so that you can choose to remain anonymous, as many of our whistleblowers, of course, do, or not. At the moment, we have about 21 open whistleblowing cases. That we tend to run around 20, 30, 40 whistleblowing cases. So we think it's well managed, it's well publicised, and of course we have a whistleblowing champion in our senior non-independent director in Sir Nicholas Sirota as well, which is plays a very significant and important role in helping us assess our whistleblowing decisions. Okay,
thanks for that. And just can I say about being election ready and bias? Now, members of your board have been quite controversial in the past and accused of being partial, politically partial. Mr. Robbie Gibb springs to mind, just given another 4-year term on your board. Is there a set of guidelines for members of the board over impartiality during a general election to ensure that there's no interference, no attempt to. It just seems strange. If you remember, one of the accusations was that he went and berated members of the Newsnight team, during an election period. That wouldn't be appropriate, would it? So, is there a set of guidelines there so that these people remain impartial?
Well, our guidelines apply to output. So what we're focused on is making sure that everything that we do.
Well, isn't he trying to influence output?
Well, first of all, he was invited to Newsnight, and I think berated is probably not quite.
We can argue about that.
There's not an argument. It's just true that he was invited. But the berated, I think, is a choice of word which perhaps not everybody would use. He had a discussion with them about the delivery of Newsnight, the delivery of impartiality. There is a code of conduct which applies to all non-executive directors of on the board.
Forgive me, but is that his role?
What is wrong?
To go down there and talk to them about delivering? Is that what he's on the board for?
No, but there isn't anything in the way in which the board is constructed as a unitary board which says that members of the board or non-executive directors of the board can't speak to programmes if programmes wish them to speak to them. There's nothing that says that. So it's not an offence against the governance of the BBC to do that. Of course, you then might judge what the conversation was about and so on and so forth. I wasn't there. But that's not in principle an offence against the governance of the BBC with a unitary board.
I'll go back to my original question, though. Is there some guidance for them during a period of a general election where it's
there's a clear code of conduct. There is not specific guidelines for the. In answer directly to your question, we don't specifically say during an election because I think this is ongoing.